Recording has started.
Thank you so much. Welcome everyone to this session. This session is Value of Data in Autonomous Driving, a fireside chat with Nitin Kumar. Before we get started, please let me run through some of our guidelines for today. Please know that this session is being recorded. All participants are muted at this time, but you may submit your questions via chat. There will be a Q&A at the end of this presentation. We will be also following up with a blog with the highlights of today's session that will be posted on womeninbigdata.org. First off, let's start with the mission of Women in Big Data. We are here to champion the success of women in big data careers, and we do so through 4 vectors. We inspire, we connect, we help you grow your careers, and we elevate by providing leadership opportunities. We have grown since inception back in 2015, and we have truly become a movement with over 17,000 women in chapters all over the world. We have chapters as far as Pakistan, Jordan, and Bangladesh at this time. Here we show some of the sponsors and partners that are supporting us. As you can see, there is a number of premier organizations that are supporting women in big data at this time. And without further ado, let us introduce today's speaker. Nitin Kumar is a Silicon Valley CEO. He is a board member and a former management consulting partner. Nitin has a 20-year career providing value to startups and large companies alike, as CEO, as advisor, and as board member. Nitin is a very active thought leader and influencer with articles in Forbes and other premier publications. So, without further ado, let us welcome our esteemed speaker, Nitin Kumar, my mentor. Nitin, welcome.
Eliana, thank you very much for having me here. And I'm delighted to talk to so many talented individuals. Happy to share my experiences. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Nitin, for joining us. As a reminder to everyone, this session has been designed as in a conversation format. Several questions were submitted by you and obviously by yours truly. So Nitin, are you ready to get started?
Yo.
Excellent. So Nitin, tell us a little bit about your current focus with the Aspen Institute. What was compelling to you about your role?
Excellent question, Eliana. So where I was in my career, I always constantly look for intellectual stimulation. Think about the Aspen Institute as a global think tank where like-minded people join, brainstorm on issues, make a real tangible impact. It's through events, it's through research data, and it's really brainstorming on real problems. So I'm involved with Aspen Digital and work with very, very talented people, both in the technology side and the policy side. I'm working on the future of smart cities, particularly on the autonomous driving side and the VTOL, which is vertical takeoff and landing. And many people would know this as air taxis and the whole aerial ecosystem that is coming into play. One of the things that compelled me to take a look at something like Aspen was the fact that we are in an unprecedented era. We've got technology and business models are lagging and regulation is super lagging, right? And in my career, one of the gaps is that I did not understand the policy part and the regulatory part of the world that well. But given the disruptive nature of technologies like an artificial intelligence, autonomous driving, the whole ethics in AI and all that stuff, Silicon Valley is extremely good at producing cutting edge technology, but it is not going to make a lot of progress without the policy side of it. Who does what? The infrastructure needs to evolve, regulation needs to be evolved, the scales and monopolies, as we think about, are being disrupted and redefined. So it was also a quest to connect to a lot of that kind of talent and thinking on the legal and policy side. So people like me need to educate ourselves on how that part of the world thinks, as well as impart our knowledge and experience to the ecosystem, which isn't exactly playing in the cutting edge of technology. So it's just a blend of both minds, and collectively, how can we solve these problems and make progress?
Excellent, excellent. It is clearly a very complex nut to crack. So if we follow this train of thought here, you have authored several publications in the value of data with a focus on solving for autonomous driving. Here is a bold prediction for you, and I want to ask you if you agree or disagree with this prediction from the Counterpoint research. With solution of both technology and regulatory issues, around 15% of new cars will be autonomous in 2030, and that is level 4 or level 5. Do you agree with this bold prediction?
Well, I think we need to peel the onion and understand a little bit from a distinct lens. I was in a very different place a couple, 3 years ago. And if somebody asked me when is level 5 autonomous driving coming in, I would have said 2030, 2040, 2050, pick your own bet, right? But as I was talking to several people in the autonomous driving value chain, and I understood more of it, I believe that opportunity is here and now, right? If you want to make money, and if you want to sort of scale, and if you want to make a difference or go up the value chain. Given that the test infrastructure very silently and tacitly has grown on us. It was like 18 billion when I last looked at it. It may be some multiples of that at this point of time. And by the way, the test infrastructure is never going away, right? It's looking at deep learning, machine learning, data, sensor performance, reliability, stability. So is level 4 and level 5 a reality today? I would say arguably, yes, it's in the test infrastructure. It's a reality. Now, will that manifest uniformly to 2030 with level 4 and level 5 in every country, every county, every place? The short answer is I don't think so. Is 15% a viable and reasonable number? Sure. They're already putting up autonomous zones in places like Pittsburgh, in many places in China. There's one in Arizona, excuse me. And 15% doesn't look like a big number there. Then the second question is that what is autonomous driving when it comes to commercial and when it comes to personal? The commercial autonomous driving, I believe the number is going to be way more than 15% because you drive in those campuses, you drive in autonomous zones, you are doing transportation in fleets. In the personal and consumer vehicle space, 15% I think is still a tall order. There's many things to be solved, including smart infrastructure, smart traffic, smart cities, and whatnot. So the long-winded answer to your very astute question is that the answer lies in sort of decomposing these into test infrastructure, mainstream infrastructure, then the mainstream into further fleets, in zone and out zone, right? So if you amalgamate all that, 15% looks realistic, but those numbers can go higher and lower depending on what lens and how you look at it.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for that answer. And certainly in places like California, there are some mandates that may add some gas, if you will, to this prediction. But thank you so much. And if we move on to the technology side of things, how important is the impact of the technology stack on data-driven business models?
So I will answer that with respect to autonomous vehicles, given the topic is here. The technology stack has profound implications on the business model of autonomous vehicles. For example, if you look at the stack, it's kind of cut into 5 distinct layers. There is a sensor package or the sensor stack. On top of that, there is a whole infrastructure stack. Then sits compute and network. Then you have the hardware and software interface. And then on top of that sits a myriad of applications. And those applications can range from driving services, driver assist services, and is exploding. Now, the point to understand is that there is a very big debate in the industry, just to take an example, on LiDAR versus camera versus radar. Now, Tesla has said, no LiDAR, we're going to go through camera. Much cheaper, much more accurate, but requires high pixel density and processing power on the car, right? So there is an impact there. The LiDAR guys have got a little bit less aesthetic appeal with those big clunky things sitting atop, and that is more expensive. You require less processing power on the car, and maybe the aesthetic appeal is not necessarily glued to the consumer side as yet. So that will go to the fleets. So your business model is impacted right there, right, with the sensor package. Now, more number of sensors, more ability to collect data, more ability to process data, more ability to get smarter. Having said that, requires more processing power, more integrations, more sort of analysis, and it kind of eats into the battery power. So it has a profound impact on range. Okay. Then you go into the operating system. So think about Tesla being the iOS model. It's all about design and software and user experience, whereas Baidu is going open source. So that's more on ranges and more features and functionality, and coming from a little bit less aesthetically designed stuff. So that goes into more cargo and fleets and things like that, right? So there is a profound impact on how these things are configured, how many sensors you choose, which technology you choose, how you monetize it. Is it aesthetically appealing? Is it consumer suitable? How many services can you offer? Now, let's talk about services, right? And when I talk about services, the monetization vector is not only in driving services, whether it helps me change the lane or it kind of anticipate traffic. That's one layer of services, which are driver. The second one is a little bit more futuristic, and I'm just going to make up this example. It's like in the autonomous car, you send your kids to the school. Now, who has the ability to open the door? What's the security there? How do people get access? So that's a whole set of other driving services. And it's, again, if you're part of the fleet, there's a different business model in it, what kind of data, how you monetize it. So there is a very profound impact on each layer of the stack, what is picked in the stack, how they talk to each other, what is the configuration, what's the cost, impact on range, impact on aesthetic appeal, what software comes in, and how the ecosystem is woven around it. Obviously, all this is interlinked with data, certain attributes of data, the scale of the data, the timing of the data, and all that. So a stack is, especially in autonomous driving, really laser focuses on the entire business model, which is glued together with data, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That definitely makes sense. So when you think about this technology stack, is there a layer there that is less advanced than the others?
I would say the networking part is a little less complex. There is the DSRC and there is the cellular V2X, right? That's a little more commoditized. Sensors are evolving. There will be new sensors, but at the end of the day, there's only as many configurations of sensors and how they collect, what data kind of being calibrated. So those two, I think, are more advanced. The network and compute is still evolving. What gets computed on the car, what gets computed on the edge, what gets computed on the cloud. I mean, think about this, the whole autonomous car as a mobile data center in itself. There are millions of transactions per second, which stop sign picture to take, how the pedestrian communication happens. All of that really works in like a data center mode, and it's also mobile, it's not static. So life changes a little bit on that layer. Now the applications, there are many use cases, more services coming in, people are getting more creative. So that part hasn't really evolved. It's constantly evolving. Again, the choice of technology, if it's more cellular, it's easier to identify pedestrians and notifications, can send traffic data and all that stuff. So there's a lot of evolution happening up the stack. Sensors, infrastructure, a little bit in a flux. Sensors more evolved, infrastructure evolving. Software hardware interfaces, again, somewhere in the middle. network more evolved. Applications is a continuous opportunity for innovation up the stack.
Mhm, mhm. So super interesting, Nitin. So as you describe those data challenges, that reminds me of this notion that data is the new gold, or more importantly, or more related to today's conversation, think about data as the new oil. You have disputed that notion, and in fact, you provided in one of your publications a framework that has in one vector useful life and on a comparable vector data usage. Can you talk about how this framework of useful life and data usage negates this notion that data is the new goal? Talk about the framework and talk about why this isn't so.
Yeah, let's make this a little bit simple and peel the onion, right? So I'm not disputing data is the new gold. What I'm adding in the framework is that data is also silver, also copper, also iron, and pick your metal. Because as you all know, data is not one thing, and it's not about how much data you land. It's about what are the right attributes of data and how you monetize it. Okay, so there is inherently in autonomous driving and in any other part of the ecosystem, you can take that to any industry and extrapolate that. There is obviously fast data and there is slow data. Okay, and fast data eventually can become slow data, but it's really on the useful life of it. If it's like there is a construction going on and there's a real traffic update, that data is extremely valuable. It goes into the map and then it's calibrated into the into the car dashboards, and it gives you stuff like that, right? That's sort of what I call fast data. And it's also got an ecosystem vector, not an internal vector. So think about it, and it's in the article, so you can visually see that framework. The slow data is really about, okay, the condition monitoring of my car, the maintenance data, the sort of wear and tear, what happens to my infotainment and all that kind of stuff. That data is stored, processed, and it needs to hit a certain critical mass before it starts getting valuable and the ecosystem picks it up, right? And then obviously the lowest value data, I would call it, is slow and internal, which is, reports and things like that. Then you have the ecosystem data, which is slow, which is analytics, and this data, which kind of slow data aggregates and becomes something meaningful and useful to be consumed through APIs or to be kind of interfaced with insurances or at a fleet level and so on and so forth. Then you have the fast data, which is internal, which are really actionable data used for simple use cases like traffic and whatnot. Obviously, then you have the ecosystem data that is actually rapid fire and high pace, like real-time payments, real-time insurance, micro-insurance, and it's as rapidly generated as it is monetized through the ecosystem. So that becomes the most valuable. So it's almost like a four-quadrant framework, which you will see. So as I said, the ecosystem fast data is gold, then ecosystem external data, ecosystem internal data is copper, and put your metal on the other stuff. So it's a myth that capturing large volumes of data, just landing them and continuing to get data, everything is gold. Not necessarily. I mean, for 100 years, we've been mining all sorts of metals, and you can take the analogy of data and we will continue to mine all sorts of data, right? Some have immediate value, some have aggregate value, some have lower value.
That makes a lot of sense to me, Nitin. And as a aside, I actually was test driving a Tesla not too long ago. And it's interesting that Tesla actually now offers insurance. And you were talking about driving behavior data as part of many data threats. And they are monetizing driving behavior and their understanding of the Tesla drivers in a way that saves me money as a consumer. So certainly fits the framework that you have presented. So if we take this framework, and before we go and ask our audience to direct the questions to you, talk about how this data value framework that you have created can be expanded to other industries.
Sure. I think this data framework holds for most industries. Now, go back and kind of try to put any IoT analogy on it. There's all kinds of data, a lot useful, not useful, real time, not real time. I think any ecosystem data that is fast will have a lot of value, be it in drones, be it in VTOL, be it in healthcare, all that stuff, right? Fast ecosystem data is the highest value when you can put any use case on it. If somebody is having a health problem, you can immediately take that condition, push it into the ambulance APIs or whatever that is extremely high data, right? But if somebody is putting on weight that is internal data and it's slowly adding up, and yeah, sure, those reports come in, they go to your doctor, and over a period of time, if the trend is there and multitudes of data are collected, they're going to tell you to do something about it, right? So that's internal data and that's slow, which aggregates. So that's the case. Take it into agriculture. If it's real time, if there's the soil moisture is changing, that sort of analytics. But then there's real-time prediction of yield and whatnot, or sort of rodents coming in. That's obviously more valuable. So I think you can take it and put it on, superimpose it onto any IoT system. It's a question of just mapping the right use cases on what is ecosystem fast on one end of the spectrum and what is internal and slow on the other end of the spectrum. And then there is everything in between. I believe all your use cases in every industry which is data intensive will fall across that continuum. And where it falls across the continuum has an intrinsic business model woven around those use cases and a monetization vector, all right? And that's the way to think about it in any data intensive industry. It can just be a simple software program on how data aggregates and aggregation value versus real-time value and how you put it. And some people have built business models just monetizing slow and internal data, but you need a volume and it's a slower ramp, and people who can ingest data at high speed and monetize it in the ecosystem is a different business model. There's no right or wrong. You just have to pick the right case, weave the right business model around it.
That makes a lot of sense to me, Nitin. And before we move to questions from our audience, is there anything coming out of your work at the Aspen Institute that you will want to share with this audience that haven't been covered on the questions before?
There's a few different reports coming out, right? Stay tuned for that. There is a lot of work also happening in the autonomous driving space in security, right? That really means security at each stack. That's one part of it. Obviously, ethics in AI is a big factor on whether an algorithm can decide who to save, who not to save, what happens if the autonomous car is going and pedestrians are on the way. So there's a lot of debate happening on that front. There are also changes in the regulatory landscape, particularly with the whole vertical takeoff and landing part, right? Because it's microflights. What's the responsibility of a county? What's the responsibility of a state? And what use cases manifest? Smart cities are also building their policies and relooking at all that on what data belongs to who. So Aspen has got many different aspects to it, and there are a number of think tanks at work there, and all those reports in due course would be hopefully made public.
Thank you, Nitin. And Regina, I wanted to ask if there are any questions from the audience before we open it to the audience for potentially questions directly to our speaker.
Nothing in the chat.
So this is the end of our prepared questions, and I want to encourage the audience to either write questions directly, or Regina, perhaps we can unmute our participants as well.
Yeah, people can unmute themselves, I believe, if they want to go ahead with any questions.
So I see a number of participants, and I am hoping that you have been inspired to ask questions. So please either unmute yourself or submit your questions through the Q&A.
Okay, I have a question. So Nitin, ethical AI is something I'm very interested in. In fact, we're going to do a session on that, a series on that, I should say, next year. Wanted to hear more about your particular involvement on some of these ethical questions around, does the grandmother or the baby get run over and this kind of stuff?
Yeah, look, I mean, this question is not yet solved, and by no means am I an ethics expert. I'm also as novice in this space as many of you are. Having said that, I know a number of fascinating companies who have kind of built their whole business around looking at algorithmic biases, right? Now, the challenge here is really about a bias can be inherent, which is an algorithm can decide, who to run over, right, or not. The other thing can be, it can be induced if there is an infrastructure change. It can be induced by a regulation change, right? So there's internal and external stuff, and quite honestly, there aren't very many clear answers to it, although there are many paths leading to it. If you do want to connect with a couple of those companies and a couple of people in my network who are more qualified to opine on this, please ping me offline. I'm happy to make those introductions. But this is not an area where I am really qualified to answer these questions, unfortunately.
Okay, well, Eliana said to ask you a hard question, so I did my job. And thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, Nitin. Once again, I want to encourage the audience to unmute themselves and provide any questions you may have. I see a question on the chat.
Yep, so this is from Yin Chuan, and sorry if I probably didn't pronounce your name properly. So you talked about data that's gold, silver, copper, etc. Do you have any examples of what you would consider gold versus copper in autonomous driving? What are companies like Tesla really interested in? So it looks like there's two questions there.
Yeah, there's probably two questions in there. Let me answer that, right? And once again, there will be some resources made available to you. The framework visually is in one of those articles on the value myth of big data. I would consider in autonomous driving real-time data which is monetized through the ecosystem. For example, the example that I used before, you're driving in your car, there is something happens to the terrain, you kind of move into a terrain and your brake kind of is challenged. There is a real-time update that goes into the cloud. There is an OTT over-the-top software update to fix that brake, and also real-time insurance company is notified and there is a micropayment made. Okay, that's one example. Second example of the gold data is again on the ecosystem in real time. One of the things is that, all right, you and I are going and assume a very futuristic scenario that the whole world is autonomous for now, right? And each vehicle has a priority that you bought. And I may have a rush hour priority and you may have a leisure hour priority. One particular day, we may want to trade that priority in real time when we are going. That's ecosystem data, which is gold again, right? Third use case, I'm driving and my car makes an assumption that I'm going to go at a certain speed, but lo and behold, there's a construction happening there, ad hoc construction. That real-time data is informed to the mapping company, and that mapping company directly informs and shoots an alert into my dashboard. That's sort of the gold part of it, right? And if you go into the other extreme of it, there is a certain driving behavior that I exhibit. There's nothing to worry about, but over like a year, the wear and tear on my tires is much higher than Regina's, Eliana's, or your tires, right? So over a period of time, that data kind of aggregates itself, and I get a call from my insurance company, look, dude, improve your driving, right? You just fry these tires. So that's sort of a complete end of the spectrum. Now, if you take Tesla, on one hand, it is a data center and it's a B2B business from an ecosystem standpoint, right? You connect into insurances, you connect into mapping software, you connect into payments and all that. On the other hand, it's a consumer business. And inside each of those businesses, there are a myriad of use cases, right? From condition monitoring to autonomous driving to all of that. So the short answer to the Tesla question is they play across all the four spectrums: ecosystem fast, ecosystem internal, and slow ecosystem, right? So they play on all the continuums. All the data is important, and they will continue to monetize each data in each of those buckets in a very distinct and different manner.
Mm-hmm. I think, Regina, there looks like there is another question there.
No, you were just, Nitin was getting a thank you for that fantastic answer.
Okay, I see. Mm-hmm.
So Nitin, what should we ask you that we didn't think to ask?
Well, I think there's a lot of good questions here. Let me think. Yeah, I think the one element is that there are some inherent challenges with the data landscape as well within autonomous driving, right? So those are also important to understand, and those challenges can be simple to non-trivial.
Well, we'd love for you to elucidate that a little bit since we've got a bit of time.
Yeah, I would say that, look, there are real-time and scaling challenges, right? I mean, if you think about a fleet with just a dozen cars and cameras which generate more than 1,000,000 hours of video in a few months, and once captured and transmitted, it sort of has to inform and train a deep neural learning network now, dodging every object, pedestrian, and if data is not decomposed in a modular way, these huge data sets can create a lot of problems, right? That's one. Then you have massive data sets that are weighted across many non-deterministic AI models, right? I mean, that creates a lot of debugging challenges. There's obviously lifecycle challenges with data, accuracy challenges, and then look, the AV ecosystem is an ecosystem, right? There's a lot of competition, and not everyone is going to play nice in the box and share the data, right? Many cars won't talk to each other. Many insurance companies will not talk to every car vendor. So those things are not really thought through as yet on who plays where. And if you take it into that analogy into the mobile world, there is the iOS world, which is closed, and there is the open world of Android. Both have distinct challenges. But what you also need to think through is that the scales at which data is going to come through is going to be very different, right? I mean, we all saw the advent of user-generated content era, which was through social media and YouTubes and Facebook, and so many new challenges came with that. That stuff is going to go to galactic levels, right? Put 10 to the power of whatever zero, when machine generated and sensors are going to spit out all this data, right? So just imagine what challenges are going to come in with that: scale, accuracy, ecosystem, debugging, control, right? Fake data, spoofing. Those are all interesting problems to think about. And I think each one of them is a unique opportunity to play in the value chain. I mean, you could actually build businesses around even a specific challenge to stop or at least minimize and mitigate those challenges.
Mm-hmm. So Nitin, that actually leads me to a question that is relevant to the audiences, not only here, but as I mentioned, this recording will go to all of our chapters all over the world. And that is, if you think about our mission, which is to support women with career growth within the big data industry, where do you think, from the skill set perspective, they will want to focus if they want to jump into the autonomous driving wagon, if you will?
Look, both machine learning and deep learning are pretty obvious. It's the same value in autonomous driving as it is in some of the other areas, right? I would say computer vision, I see a lot of job requirements and heavy demand in that space. And I think that's going to continue to evolve. There's a lot of challenges and dependencies because 5G is not evolved and ubiquitously deployed. I believe there's a lot of data monetization and services, the business model side of it. I also believe that at some point in time, virtual reality is going to jump into autonomous driving. So you may want to go have an office in your car when you're traveling, and I may want to have a beach, right? So There's a lot of design opportunities on how data gets visualized and kind of gets manifested into that. So one of the things that people keep asking me is that, oh, all these Uber drivers and all these guys are going to go out of jobs. I mean, I'm like, think about all these new jobs that are going to get created, right? On the ethics side, on the design side, right? Inside virtual reality, inside computer networking, inside computer vision, all of that, driver services. So there's a lot of opportunity. And I think at the moment, if I see the market, there's a lot more demand for computer vision people, and also the semiconductor guys like NVIDIA and ARM continue to sort of innovate in the space. So there's a myriad of opportunities that are going to unfold immediately. I believe machine learning, deep learning, computer vision.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I don't see really any more questions on the chat, but we can probably move on. So as I look at the rest of the program here, and before sharing these additional references that people can go and read more about, and I know, Nitin, you are very supportive and you will always welcome questions outside of this format.
Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or ping me offline, and happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Be careful of what you ask for. But if we step away a little bit from today's topic, and we sort of expanded to your overall 20-year experience as an advisor, as a CEO, what are those books in your library that you will recommend to this constituency?
Look, there are obviously many books right now, but three of them really fascinated me. One is The Industries of the Future by Alec Ross, right? And the other one, which is a must read if you are in the disruptive era, it is by Salim Ismail, called Exponential Organizations. And many of us have lived this in larger companies, whereas whenever you try to do something disruptive and game-changing in a big company, the cultural antibodies come and attack you very quickly and kill it, right? So Exponential Organizations really answers that question on why these antibodies are generated in the large legacy organizations, and what is the playbook to actually suppress them? What are the companies that are doing well? What are the companies who are lagging behind? So that
Exponential one, could you repeat it, please?
I'm sorry?
I'm writing down the name of the books. So Exponential
Organizations, it's by Salim Ismail, and Industries of the Future by Alec Ross. And again, not to belittle some of the other great books there. These are the two that come on top of my mind right now.
That's very good. And continuing on this thread, I know that networks are a passion of yours. And I know specifically human networks are something that you are continuously blogging about, writing about, and also practicing yourself. So tell this audience why building these human networks has been important in your career.
Look, it was, let me answer this in two ways, right? One is that it was a natural ability. I like to connect with people, and I'm just fascinated by how people think, right? Over a period of time, when your professional network hit a certain critical mass, it just went exponentially up. So I got lucky there. Having said that, in today's era, it's actually more important than ever for two reasons. One is that at least I come from an era where, all my education, be it engineering or management or whatever, taught me how to build businesses to withstand change and risk, right? How to sort of build something to last. What is happening in the market and today's world is the exact opposite, right? You need to adapt and change, not build something to last 100 years. It just doesn't work. So you have to unlearn everything that you learned. By the way, if you go back and read the book, Good to Great or Built to Last, all those good companies that they mentioned there are either struggling or are no longer there. So that's how quickly the world changes. Now, how does that work in real life, right? Actually, 3 years back, 4 years back, I didn't know anything about autonomous driving or even blockchain. The way I learned is that if you look at those things that come with a bunch of logos, right? CB Insights, or you have a bunch of companies, you pop in on your LinkedIn many times. When I wanted to learn blockchain, I looked at that and said, okay, I want to talk to all these 110 companies, which had this 0.5 millimeter logo on it. I could actually reach 50, 60 of them pretty quickly through my network. By the time you have your 30th conversation, I kid you not, you are an expert in your own right. You know what people have thought, what people have not thought, who can partner with whom, what they see, what they don't see, where is an M&A deal, where is an opportunity, where is a partnership. And by the time you do your 50th conversation, you can teach anybody blockchain, right? So that's how in today's world you take and learn. I don't think you can take a book and become an expert. It's the crowd and community era, and that's where a human network today is much more important, powerful source of knowledge. And you don't have to talk to CEOs. You can talk to like the most junior most person in a company when they have something to teach you on a particular domain. Because clearly, one thing is that it's fascinating to see how people think and what they have captured and what they have missed. So try this for yourself. Pick a topic, pick drones, pick quantum computing, go talk to 50 companies. You'll feel that you know a lot more by your 30th conversation. Then you can go read a book or listen to podcast and sort of validate it. And by that time, you generally don't agree with a lot of what's written in a book or a podcast, right? Because these are also written by people.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And as I mentioned to everyone before, Nitin is a mentor of mine, and it's something that he's been teaching me along many years of knowing each other. So with that, and not seeing any more questions in the chat, I do encourage people to reach out to Nitin directly. He is on LinkedIn. He's prominent there. And in fact, the next slide shows some of the materials that he has written about that relates directly to this topic of autonomous driving, mobility data challenges, etc. You will find those online, and you can hear more directly from the expert, from Nitin Kumar. So before we close on today's session.
Excuse me for one sec. This information will also be included in Eliana's blog, which will be up on womeninbigdata.org in roughly a week, which will also include a link to this recording.
Yes, and I'm not sure if this is a question. I think that it might be one more question. Nitin, do you mind hanging in there for a couple more minutes?
Sure.
Regina, are you able to read the chat?
Yeah, it's from Sabrosty. Hi, Sabrosty. Thanks for the wonderful, informative talk, Nitin, exclamation point. What is the advice you have for people who want to be part of area of autonomous driving? I think he talked about a little bit. There's lots of entry points, but maybe he can reiterate. What are the mistakes that one can avoid when trying to get in this field?
Yeah, look, I mean, this space is evolving. I think there's lots of mistakes yet to be made in this space. I would say the best way is to get involved with the community, right? Either a special interest group or a think tank like Aspen or any of those places. I think that's a good starting point to get into this space. Somebody had sent me what are the top podcasts on autonomous driving. I'm sure I have that somewhere. I can also send that to you. Now, one thing I would say is that be very clear on what value chain of autonomous driving you want to play. Do you want to play in machine learning? Do you want to play in infrastructure? What layer of the stack? Are you a business model person? Pick and focus on where you want to go, right? As I told you, when data is not one thing, you need to clearly go, I want to go be the use case person, or I want to go be the machine learning person. You need to pick your spot to do the entry. If you try to go too broad, the problem is that the specialist zone is missed out, right? You become lots of things to lots of people, not creating value. You become a generalist with, what do you call that? A mile wide and an inch deep, right? What you need to do in autonomous driving is the exact opposite, actually.
That is very good advice. And again, I'm having a hard time reading the chat here. Regina, is there anything else before we?
No, I just captured what Nitin said. Check out communities, pick a spot in entry of value chain. That's it. No more questions at this point.
Okay.
And Nitin, thank you for your time. Back to you, Eliana.
Yes, absolutely, Nitin. Thank you so much for making time for this. I know you do have a very busy schedule, but I do want to encourage everyone to please join Women in Big Data. We continue to be focused on you and what your needs are. And I know Nitin welcomes your direct connection through LinkedIn. So we'll provide that on the blog as well. So you have that open invitation from our speaker today. Thank you so much. And thank you, Regina, for helping us moderate.
Yeah, thank you everyone as well. It was a pleasure being here.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.